Welcome back to Behind the Brim, where we go inside the mind of scratch golfers, club champions, and industry experts. Our goal is to uncover insights that'll help you lower your handicap and enjoy the game of golf even more. I'm your host, Cameron Lindsay, and I want to personally thank you for joining us for today's show. If you have any questions about anything you hear or just want to get in touch with us, please reach out at our Instagram, behindthebrim_golf, and we'd be happy to chat. Without any further ado, let's get to today's guest. Really thrilled to be joined today by my buddy, co-host Chandler Donor. How we doing today, buds?
Linz, I'm doing great, man. Really excited for the episode ahead. Why don't you give our viewers a little bit of a taste of what's in store?
Well, yeah, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. This is we're recording this call on the Monday following the Sunday of the Canadian Open. Obviously, an iconic win by Nikki Taylor yesterday. So we definitely want to spend some time, recapping that and dropping a few hot takes around what we saw. But for today's pod, Donor, I really think we're just going to cover the Canadian Open, right? What happened, what the numbers say, some big takeaways from us. And we want to take a moment to discuss the US Open Final Qualifier that happened at Lambton last week on Monday, right? So my home golf course of Lambton hosted one of the 13 final qualifying sites for the US Open. So there's 27 guys that played off for 3 spots. And so we're previewing the US Open, and what better way to share our experience from that day and some of our hot takes from what we saw. There was Michael Block was out there, Ludwig Aberg, #1 amateur in the world, among some other elite PGA Tour pros. And you and I hoofed it around for 10 hours. So that was, a really neat experience. And then want to close it out with the US Open preview, man. We're in store for an absolutely epic week ahead at LACC. So I think that's kind of where we go with today's chat, and really excited. There's so many good takeaways from the last couple of weeks of golf leading into this US Open, and I think we're in for an electric conversation today, buddy.
No kidding. Me too. Can't wait.
All right, pal. Well, let's get into it. Yesterday was a special moment for us Canadians, as everyone knows. Chan, you and I are both Canadian, and to see Nick Taylor win in that 4-hole playoff against Tommy Fleetwood, drop a 72-foot eagle putt on the 4th playoff hole, the par 5, to break the 69-year curse that the Canadian hadn't won in that time frame. I think I looked it up, but nobody had won since Pat Fletcher in 1954. I with all due respect to Mr. Fletcher, I'd never heard that name before. So really cool moment for Canada. I know I was watching it with my dad, and we both just erupted when that putt went down. Nicky's first win in 3.5 years, and I think just a special moment for Canada. Honestly, I think there's a lot to take away from that. I know you and I spoke about how well the golf course held up, how well the fans showed up. The Canadian fans were unbelievable. The rink hole was cool, but talk to me a little bit, Chan, about that moment for you. Like how cool was that to see one of our own get it across the line?
Well, how cool was the support from the other players too, right? You saw Weirzy, Hadwin, Connors, Terrell stayed back, Shane stayed back, Justin stayed back. There was a group of guys that just stayed back and watched the two guys just duke it out in the playoff. Like I've missed it in past tournaments, but that's not something that I see as a familiar sight either. But man, I was there at St. George's last year, and the fans were just insane. Same as this year, right? Like the highlight for me was when they were sort of just going toe to toe on the playoff holes, and you saw guys literally sprinting across fairways from 18 to 9. Like that, like, come on, like look at the dedication that shows from Canadian golf. But yeah, to see Nikki close it out in that fashion is just crazy. I couldn't believe it. I didn't have the same reaction as you did, Lance. Like I just couldn't. I was like, no way that went in, type of thing. Like I couldn't believe it. And then the putter drop was maybe all time.
Oh yeah.
And then I think we'd be remiss to not mention Hadwin wheeling onto the green and getting taken out by the security guard. That's all time too.
Hattie just gets clotheslined by a 220-pound security guard.
Just right in the chest, taken down quick with the bottle of champagne. Oh, man. But yeah, no, what a great event. I feel bad for Tommy, but I think like similar to what happened with the way that they were broadcasting it with VJ back with Weirzy a few years ago was, that's a moment that Nick's going to probably remember for the rest of his life. And, maybe Canada golf in general will probably remember for the rest of, for at least in the foreseeable future. So just hats off to Tommy for being a good competitor. I 100% think he would have poured that putt in too to force another one if that hadn't gone in. But yeah, just what a tournament. I mean, shout out to Oakdale too. I've played that golf course a handful of times, and with what they did with the layout was just awesome. They've got a great piece of property with 27 holes there, and I'm just really impressed at how they juggled the 3 9s and created a really good golf course. It tested the players really, really well, especially that front 9. And then I really like, that feel of, you get through those first handful of golf holes, and then that you can settle in, and if you get hot, you can blow the doors down. I really like the way that tournament vibe feels. It creates a lot of, it creates a great storyline, especially with Fleetwood coming home, knowing he's got a handful of birdies in regulation that he can pour in to win it outright. I just think it really elevates the story. And I thought Oakdale did a really good job hosting this year. So just a shout out to them as well.
Yeah, I do. I like the fact that there are birdieable closing holes, because it keeps things entertaining. Like, so many guys, it was a 5-horse race, right? Right until the end. Like, obviously, Nicky poured in that absolutely clutch putt to get to 17 under, and before him, like, Tyrrell Hatton made a big putt for birdie to get to 16, and CT Pan was pushing, trying to make eagle at the last to get to 17, and Aaron Rye was in the mix. He had an eagle putt to get to 17. So there's so many so many moving parts. And I actually really like that in a golf tournament, where it's more about who can close it strong. And
agreed.
I think you're right. I think Oakdale held its own really well. I want to get to the stats a little bit before we get into our hot takes from the week. So what got the job done for Nicky here, right? So the two things I want to call out, once again, shout out to my buddy Wilker Shane with Data Golf, but two things to really call out. Nicky really elevated his putting this week. And he really elevated his ball striking, his irons. So those were the two facets of the game that he just took to a completely different level that allowed him to get this across the line. He was gaining in those two disciplines 3 shots per day on the field. So he just totally blew the doors off putting and iron play, which is a departure from what he's done, throughout the course of this year. He's been a solid iron player and a solid putter, but he was world class this week. So that was his formula for the win. And if we look at Tommy, he was a little bit of a different formula to get into that playoff. He was absolutely electric on the greens. So he was gaining, I think if we look here, he was gaining 2.25 shots on the field per day putting. So he had a Denny McCarthy-esque week at Memorial. It was just an absolutely electric putting week. He was also really solid off the tee. He was gaining over a shot per day with the driver. So his recipe to get in that playoff was putting and driving, whereas Nick's was putting and iron play. Mm-hmm. But you're starting to notice a trend, Donor, that putting is always the constant, right? Memorial for Victor, it was extremely good putting and then just solid irons and driving. And for Denny, it was just extremely good putting and solid irons. Whereas here it's putting and driving, and putting is iron. So putting seems to be the common denominator among the winners of these professional golf tournaments. So the driver is important, of course, but if you don't make the putts, right, you don't win golf tournaments. And, I see that even in my own little, amateur Ontario circuit. Like it really does come down to the days that you're putting well or the days that you score. So that was kind of their formula. I don't know if you saw anything. I mean, interesting call up. Both of those guys use a claw putting grip. It's kind of a unique approach, but they both kind of had that their left finger down the shaft on their top hand, and then their bottom hand, they had like a modified claw. So kind of neat to see two guys kind of wielding the putter in unorthodox ways, you could say, but having tremendous success.
Yeah. I was really impressed with Nicky's routine, especially in the playoff holes. Like, he was so regimented with that putter. He did the same thing. It was consistent every single time. And yeah, that left hand low, or I don't know, I'm a lefty, so I get all messed up, but that pencil or the claw grip, it was interesting. Both of them are using that. I feel like the conventional grip is sort of what you normally see, but now like in more recent years, like I feel like there's just so many ways now to grip the putter. And yeah, interesting, good call out to highlight that both of those guys in the playoff both use sort of unorthodox grips, if you will.
Mm-hmm. And getting into the take section, like
yeah,
it's impossible to it's impossible to overstate how big of a deal this was for Canada, Chan. Like it's just, I'm almost at a loss for words. Like it was a little bit emotional. It was so exciting. Like it's just, I definitely was filled with national pride. I'm not going to lie. Like if you're an American, you have so many successes, right? On the sporting stage all the time, right? Whereas as a Canadian, our country has a population of less than 40 million, right? It's kind of like the similar population I imagine to California. So we're a small sporting country, so to speak, but to have Nikki get that done, to show other Canadian juniors that are coming up through the ranks that if you really put your mind to it, just the fact that you only have a 6-month or 7-month season is not a deterrent to you being able to play on the world stage. Yep. And to your point, to see Mike Weir, legend, Canadians, the best male Canadian golfer of all time, Mikey Weir was there, like you called out, Adam Hadwin, right? There was Corey Connors, all the guys that play on that stage were there supporting him. Yep. I think that was a really cool moment. So, I mean, what this means, I think, Nikki Taylor's now going to be obviously on Mike Weir's radar for the President's Cup team next year. I think he's vaulted himself into a position of strength there. I was talking to my dad. I think it's really cool that you look at potential Canadians to play on that President's Cup team. Corey Connors would be in a position to be on that team. You have Mackenzie Hughes is in a position. You have now Nikki Taylor. If Taylor Pendrith turns on the Jets, he could be there. And Adam Hadwin could also be a contender. So there's so many Canadians now that could feature in these international competitions. I think that was a real cool takeaway for me. And then something that's interesting, I think we have traditionally viewed Mackenzie Hughes and Corey Connors as the best two Canadian male golfers presently playing on the PGA Tour. And I think in recent years, that's kind of been fair to say. But what was neat to see is Nikki Taylor has now secured his 3rd PGA Tour event. So he, in terms of the active Canadian PGA Tour golfers, he is the most winning active PGA Tour competitor now. So Mackenzie Hughes and Corey Connors both only have 2 wins, Chan. And if you go down the list, Adam Svensson and Adam Hadwin both only have 1 apiece, right? So I think it would surprise a lot of people to know that Nikki Taylor is actually the most, I don't know if you'd say decorated, but in terms of wins, he's the most decorated active PGA Tour, Canadian PGA Tour member right now. So that was pretty neat. I think he just vaulted himself into a different echelon. It's not about who's the best Canadian, but it's kind of neat that he's now in this category where he has 3. And I think it'll prove to himself that like you win 1 and it's amazing, but you could catch lightning in a bottle. You win twice and you prove to yourself that it's not a fluke. You win 3 times. And I think you establish yourself as like a winner on the PGA Tour. Like there was no fluke about it.
No, absolutely not. And just to call out his weekend, right? Like he started probably like you couldn't have started worse, right? Like he was so far back, like he was fighting to make the cut at one point. And then he just blew the doors off from Friday in. So that highlights some serious resilience in Nikki for sure. And then, I think if we're talking about, clutch and just the finish, right? The putt on 17 isn't really getting talked about a ton. He poured in like a 15-footer with a little bit of break up the hill. Like that's a really good putt to give himself a chance to take the clubhouse lead, and then draws a bit of a tough lie behind the green and hits a pretty decent chip, just doesn't catch the slope on 18, and then pours it in from above the hole that, you saw a lot of other players miss that same putt, right? That putt broke 5 different ways. So I think, just the resilience in the clutch that he had to force the playoff is something that like really stood out to me. And then the fact that he pours one in from 1,000,000 feet with like good speed that was going a foot by, like what a putt there too. So just like the reliance on the putter and how much belief he had coming home. And and he just played so well from Friday in. And yes, I think, the President's Cup piece is definitely interesting. I think someone on the broadcast yesterday said, like, how many Canadians can you take?
Yeah.
And like, what a cool feeling as a Canadian golfer to hear that kind of come through when you're talking about the world stage. Just really just cool. Like, there's nothing really other that I can say about it other than, like, that just hits a nerve, strikes a nerve. It's really interesting, and it's cool to see. It creates belief, I'm sure, for a ton of young players in this league. And it's just going to continue to elevate our provincial circuit, right? And it's just great to see. And one last shout out before we chime on is just the fans, man. Like,
Mhm.
like, how cool was that? Like, it was just so cool to watch. Like, they were just screaming for Nikki on the way in. It was just so cool, man. It really was like a flagship moment for Canadian golf and Golf Canada. So I'm really happy that I was able to be awake and watching it.
100%. And before we jump into Tommy, I just wanted to commend Nick on, he still did the walk and talk interview on the back nine when he was in the mix with the broadcasters, with Trevor Immelman and the crew. Like, I think a lot of players might have declined. They made a commitment early in the week before they knew they were going to be in contention, and they were coming down the stretch with a chance to win. And he still grabbed the AirPod, threw it in his ear, and gave them, a candid interview like mid-round. So I just want to commend him on honoring his commitments there and just being a class act all around. So
seems like a 10 out of 10 guy. Honestly, he really does. And he's the guys that we've got in the circuit just are really showing our country proud. Honestly, in my opinion, I think they're all really stand-up guys. Nick, Corey, Taylor, Mackenzie, all those guys are just such good role models for Canadian golfers. So I'm really proud to be a supporter of all of them.
100%. And getting on to Tommy, I mean, I'll be honest, I root for Tommy week in, week out. I think he's an absolute beauty.
Yep.
Love the way he carries himself, love his golf game. He just compresses the absolute heck out of the golf ball.
Yep.
Candidly, I was rooting against him today, or excuse me, we're recording on the Monday after the conclusion of the tournament. So yesterday I was rooting against him, but big takeaway for me, 119 events for Tommy Fleetwood on the PGA Tour, $17.7 million in earnings, 0 wins, Chan. So he had a chance to win in regulation. He needed a birdie on the short par 5 18th, under 500-yard hole. It's an iron for him, or an iron some sort of metal wood. And he stick handled an iron off the tee into the right rough. And then he laid it up in the right rough in an awkward lie and had was only able to have like a 40-foot birdie look and, stick handled it down there for a par. So definitely saw some signs of nerves, and I'm definitely not casting any judgment because I play in little local provincial stuff and I'm shaking in my boots for nothing on the line. So I can't even imagine the pressure that those guys felt. But I think it's a bit of a red flag, Chan. Like he putted, he had basically like a career putting week for himself. He struck the ball well and he still wasn't able to get get it across the line. Like there's a ton of positive takeaways for him. Like he definitely held his own in the playoff. It wasn't like he coughed up the win. He lost to an eagle, which is, you just tip your cap and shake the guy's hand. But I mean, there's definitely a bit of a red flag on his ability to close golf tournaments, Chan, like at least on the biggest stage. Like, it's important to note he has 6 wins on the DP World Tour, the European Tour. So he is a winner, on the European Tour, but Tommy Fleetwood fans are definitely going to be a little sore on this one. Like you called out, Justin Rose, Tyrrell Hatton, some of the European contingent, they waited around to see Tommy get his first win, right? That's why there was the Canadian, European split there. He's only 32 years old, so I think he really has that going for him. My sister was commenting, he looks like he's, in his early 40s. He looked pretty weathered out there with the stubble, and he just looks older than he is, but he is only in his early 30s. He's 3 years younger than Nicky Taylor, which is surprising, I think, to hear. But yeah, maybe I still have high hopes for him. I know this game, he could be like a Finau where he turns on the jets and becomes, a world beater and knocks down the door and, closes 6-7 wins. But for right now, there's a bit of a red flag on his ability to close golf tournaments.
Well said. I mean, I don't really know like what happened, right? Like he threw that wedge into like a foot on 17. He had a bit of a run going, and like I think again on the broadcast they were saying, he had all the confidence that they were, going to win that golf tournament, and he vocalized that, and he was in a perfect position, right? Like I don't know, like I wrote down a few, like is it strategy? Like what happened on 18? Like did he have enough bat off the iron? Like they kept kind of
nerves, buddy.
You think? I mean,
I think it was he hadn't made a swing that loose probably all day, and then he steps up with an iron. He didn't make a swing that loose in any of the playoff holes.
No,
actually he did on the final time around where he hit it in the left bunker. But yeah. I've honestly that guy's one of the best ball strikers in the world, and for him to miss a fairway with probably a 4-iron,
I know
is rare, man. So that's kind of where I have a little bit of a red flag around.
Yeah.
He could have slammed the door closed. And once again, not casting judgment, but and then to lay it up in the rough on the side of the hill.
Yeah.
Tough.
And I was listening to Colt, and Colt was sort of continuously saying like he definitely could have had a medal on it. Like, I don't know, obviously, like they're not in the greatest of positions to dictate lie or just even stance, right? Like he may have not been, like it was a low P shot if he had put wood on it, but I don't know. Like, I called into the thought process a bit of the strategy. I think he played that golf hole really well throughout the entire week, and then he didn't really play it well on final hole of regulation. And he had birdied it all 3 days prior. I don't know. And then to have like a 40-footer, like once he laid it up, like he had to struggle to get it down in 2 and make par, right? And then I think like, once he made that birdie on 17, I thought he was going to win. Like I would have, if I was a betting man, I would have bet my money on him closing the door. Like it's a relatively straightforward par 5 to finish with a good look for eagle in some cases. It just, I don't know. I don't want to, I'm a big fan of his too. I love his game. I mean, you called him out looking weathered, but guy swings it like he's 25. His body just moves so well through impact, right? I think he gets to that other side of his golf swing just remarkably. Maybe one of the better players on tour in terms of his ability to rotate through the ball. He showed glimpses of hitting really good wedge shots into 17. Like I think, in my opinion, yeah, you hit the loose swing on 18 from the tee ball, but then you lay it up into the fairway you hit it to the fairway, and then you got your strength of the game, right? Like,
yeah,
his best part of his game is his ability to hit wedges, in my opinion. At least that's sort of been the standout from me watching him in the last handful of years. And he had the ability to just, throw it down and lay it up into the number that he needed and shove it close, right? And he did that in the playoff hole when he hit it into the bunker. Like that was the strategy that I thought he was going to employ in the regulation hole. I thought he did well in the playoffs. He missed a few putts that, I'm sure he would want back, but I thought he put good strokes on both of them. And he poured one in on the first playoff hole to force Nikki to make a 6-footer. Yeah. Like, come on, we can't be super judgmental about the way he played the playoff holes. I thought he played them great. Yeah, sure, loose swing on the last playoff hole, but he had a really well thought out decision to lay it down, and then he hit it to a spot he had just missed a putt from. And he knew the exact read. Like, I'm sure that was the thought process: is let's hit it into the same vicinity, so I know exactly where that putt's going. So I'm going to hit it right there, and I'm going to pour it in and learn from my mistakes. And he did exactly that. So I don't think you can blame him if you're going to spite him, or if you're going to take one thing. I still don't worry about his ability to close. I think he can close. I just think that it almost looked like he felt rushed in the fairway on that 18th hole in regulation. Like I think he went to his bag super quickly and just hit it. Right. Yeah. And then when he was hitting his pitch shot, like he went up to the green, but him and his caddy, he just wanted to go back into the ball. It looked like he just kind of wanted to get out of regulation, which was a little bit weird. I think the difference maker for him is that second shot on 18. If he had poured it into the fairway, and I think he probably would have had a pretty realistic look for birdie. And then I think there would have been no red flags whatsoever if he had dumped it in the middle of the fairway and just missed the putt. You know what I mean? Like, I think the only really cause for concern was those two sort of, he hit a not so great swing off the tee, and then he sort of compounded his mistake. And I think that's why people are kind of coming after him. But man, he played really well all week. I still regard him as a really high quality player. And now the putter's going, like, ooh, you get a guy who ball strikes it like that, and the putter's kind of, accompanying him on that journey. That's I don't know if that's a bit of a green light in my eyes, right? Like, you hit like someone who's that pure, and then the putter starts to go.
Yeah, look out.
Look out, right? So
I honestly think, man, like, if Tommy was a stock, like, I'm bullish on Tommy. I'm buying Tommy.
Me too.
I think they called out in the broadcast. He's been working with Butch Harmon for, and in terms of like the skill, like, Butch Harmon is known as not being a guy that really changes technique too much. He more focuses on, like, he refines little things, but he's more like a confidence whisperer. Like, he's the guy that gets in players' ears and gives them the belief that they can win at the highest level. Like, when Jimmy Walker started working with Butch Harmon, he won the PGA Championship. He just gave him the belief that you're good enough to win at the highest level. And Butch has done that with so many guys. Ricky's now back with Butch, and his play is vaulted. So I actually think the addition of Butch to his team is going to hold him in really good stead from that mental perspective, and just the belief in terms of, I have the game to win. And I agree with you. I think you pair his really world-class ball striking with some electric putting that he's starting to show. And I think it's a recipe for success. And I looked up how he's fared in some past majors, and he's actually had the most success at the US Open and the British Open. So I think he'd be a guy to look to for the US Open and the British Open this year. And, definitely, it's definitely a space to monitor moving forward if he gets in contention and continues not to be able to close. But I have full confidence that, this will actually be a good learning opportunity for him. And, I think he is one of the best players in the world, and will continue to prove that with the wins. But let's not, I want to be mindful of our time here. Let's get into the US Open Final Qualifier here, because obviously we want to leave time to preview the US Open. So you and I had a cool opportunity. Lambton Golf Club, where I'm a member, they hosted one of the 13 final qualifying sites for the US Open last Monday on June 5th. And it was open to, the public, open to spectators. So you and I rolled through, and it was a really cool experience, man. There was 27 players vying for 3 spots into the US Open. And, basically what happened, Ryan Gerard, Vincent Norman, and Ryan Armour were the 3 guys to punch their tickets to the US Open. Little context on those 3 players. So Ryan Gerard shot 63-66. He posted 11 under, and he won by 3. He's currently a Corn Ferry Tour member. He's played 10 career PGA Tour events. His first start as a pro was actually the 2022 US Open. He qualified through final qualifying last year, and he turned pro last year as well. So this is going to be his second US Open. So he's a rookie, right? He actually hasn't secured PGA Tour status. But this was a big deal for him, right? So if you're on the Corn Ferry Tour and you're able to play in your second major championship, that's a huge deal. So kudos to him. We'll get into him a little bit later. Vincent Norman took the silver medal position. He shot 69-63. So both of those guys set the competitive course record at Lambton with the 63. He's actually a rookie on the PGA Tour. So this year he's made 10 of 18 cuts. He's made over 700 grand this year. So he's having a solid year, and this is going to be his first US Open. Really, really cool and exciting for Vince. And then finally, Ryan Armour, total departure from the last 2 guys. He shot 66, 67, 7 under, grabbed the 3rd spot alone. He's been on tour since 2007, Jan. So he's been on tour for 16 years. He's played 251 starts on the PGA Tour. This is going to be his first US Open appearance. So the wily vet, you and I kind of laughed. He's about my height, but he's built like an absolute fridge. The guy's as wide as he is tall, just so strong looking. And just a grizzled vet, man. I think he called himself in other interviews, he called himself a mule of the PGA Tour, which you and I got a good kick out of. But yeah, really cool. We followed those 3 guys around for quite a bit of the day. And really, really neat to see those guys punch their tickets. That was a big deal for these three guys, in their own respective ways. Two of them are launching their careers, and one of them is kind of, I guess, on the back nine of their career, but trying to do neat new things. And then some notables, Harry Hall, who almost won at Colonial. He was out of he shot 6 under, so he was out of the playoff by 1. Jimmy Walker, past major champion. He was out of the playoff. He shot 6 under, so he was out of the playoff by 1. And then Mr. Block shot 5 under. He missed the playoff by 2. We followed Mike around. We chopped it up with him a little bit. He's very gracious with his time. And then Ludwig Aberg, who turned pro the week of the Canadian Open, the #1 amateur in the world. He was out of the playoff by 3. He shot 4 under. It was really remarkable to watch him hit the ball. But yeah, I want to get your thoughts, Jan. Maybe give me what was the most impressive thing you saw walking around. We walked around for about 10 hours. It was a 36-hole tournament. And what was maybe the most surprising thing you saw?
I mean, sort of 2 things stand out to me. One is the viewing experience was just unbelievable. I've spoken to some buddies and just there was no ropes, right? So you're kind of able to just go where you wanted to go, and we were walking up fairways with guys. Like, obviously we were respectable in terms of giving them their space, but there was times where Block would just turn and talk to fans. Like, it was a really, really cool viewing experience. You got a ton of different sort of optics in and around shots that you're viewing, right? I think there was times where we're right behind tee blocks, right? Like literally like on the tee block. And then there's other times where we're down the line in the middle of a fairway with, they've got scoring clubs in their hand. So it's a bit of a different, it was a bit of a different viewing experience that I've ever sort of seen. When there's ropes down, you're really sort of immersed in the game of golf with these players. So I thought that was really cool. Again, special shout out to Lambton. I obviously have played it a million times with you. What a great track. What a great layout, and it held up really well. No one really blew the doors down crazy. I thought the layout was awesome. I thought the greens were sick. And then they didn't really even cut the rough. Like the rough was still sort of, you were saying this all week or all day. It was sort of how the members play it, which is really fascinating, right? Like they didn't really change the golf course from how the members play it. So, that's a testament to your level of play too, Lens, is just playing a qualifying level golf course at sort of the highest level of event on a day in and day out basis. It's definitely helpful for the game, I'm sure. But yeah, just the event was so well run. Vase did such a great job managing the crowds, managing the game. What a great guy.
Just shout out Chris Vasey, honestly,
yeah,
Chan. He's one of my favorite guys. Hopefully he's listening to this, but he is, for those of you, he's the head professional, the director of golf at Lambton. He is a consummate professional. He's great with the juniors. He's great with the senior members. He's great with the pros that came through. Like, you literally couldn't find a bad word to say about Vasey. He's everything you look for in a guy that kind of heads the golf course. And yeah, I'm really lucky to have him at the golf course. He's been great to me, and he's great to everyone around him, and can't say enough good things about him. He's an amazing person to spend time around.
Yeah, 100%. Echoed all those remarks. Just a big supporter of what you and I are doing too. Just super happy that he was able to secure this sort of as a I guess a leapfrog almost into hopefully some more competitive professional play out of Lambton. I think it's definitely got the teeth to compete at the highest level. I'm hoping personally, maybe I've got a personal bias just given you and I's relationship and my enjoyment of that game or of that golf course. I think it 100% could hold a Canadian Open. I really hope that it does. I think it would be great for Lambton, and I also think it would be great for Etobicoke golf. St. Jesus just did, and obviously Lambton's also in Etobicoke, so I think it'd be great for just our general vicinity as well. But we went off.
Give me your most surprising takeaway, Chan, because it sounds like what you were impressed by was just the event itself, the viewing experience, like just being able to get different vantage points that when the ropes are up, you have kind of tougher angles. You can't really get behind the guys. You can't rub shoulders with them. But what was the most surprising thing you saw, whether, just from the golf itself, I'd say?
It's hard to vocalize, but I was honestly surprised with course management, truthfully, Cam. I thought, I thought the guys would play the golf course better. I don't know if it's just a function of it being final qualifying and they're just trying to blow the doors off and they're not really playing strategically. But I did think that there was a few mistakes out there. I've caddied for you a handful of times in the club championships there, and some clubs that guys were pulling in some areas where people were leaving it and playing it into. I just was really surprised by. And again, obviously, like, you kind of need to know the golf course in order to identify that as a bit of a surprising moment. So recognize for our viewers, but that was one of the things that, I feel like what really separates professionals from, high quality amateurs is just the way that they're able to manage the golf course. And I wasn't overly blown away by the way that they manage that golf course, but I do want to place a caveat on the fact that it is probably due to the fact that it is final qualifying, and these guys are just trying to get as many possible birdie looks as they can. And with coming from that, they do make some mistakes, dumping it in the places that are, obviously not right. And then my other surprising moment was, golly, how long Jimmy Walker hits it. Oh my goodness. I couldn't believe it. He just hammers it. He's not a guy that, I think stands out as a really long ball player. But he just, some of the places that he put driver, I didn't even know existed on that golf course. And I know you and I looked at each other a few times. We're like, holy jeepers. Like, that is a long ball. And then the last one, not really surprising, but at the same time, just some of the windows Mr. Aberg was hitting his driver out of. Oh my goodness gracious. That was, I also didn't know that those launch conditions existed for a player. For a
human.
Oh my God. Like, high and hard out of a 100 apex window going 360 is something that I didn't think I'd see. I think he was, what was it, on 7? He was like 100 yards past Harry Higgs or something like that. Or I forget who he was playing with. He was way by someone he was playing with. Remember on that hole, he had like a flip wedge into a long par 5, or a moderate par 5 for the members, and he had wedge in.
Yeah.
No, that was definitely surprising, is how sweet he was off the tee. And I think he's going to have a really fruitful career.
Yeah. I think for me, most impressive thing I saw, and to echo you, definitely the way that Vasey ran the event with everything. That was so, for Lambton's like first kind of professionally sanctioned event in a long time, like, it was seamless. And I think the players shared that, vocalized that experience, and, the way that the fan experience was. And I think that all starts with Chris. So once again, huge shout out to Chris. But what most impressed me was the putting. I think watching those guys roll the ball, the tempo, the roll of the ball, just end over end, their speed control. It looked like every putt had a chance to go in, or most putts had a chance to go in. The way that they read the greens, even though they were foreign surfaces to these guys. I think the ball striking, it impresses me for sure in terms of the dispersion, but it never, it doesn't, with the exception of a couple guys. Ludwig, like you said, hits the ball differently, and Jimmy was hitting some different windows, but a lot of the other guys, I kind of relate to their ball striking in terms of the windows and the distance. Their dispersion is, of course, way tighter, but the putting was something that, to me, I looked at and thought, that's a huge area of improvement for myself. Because, even looking at Michael Block, when he grabs a putter and goes, or Harry Hall, this big guy with just really soft hands, that's just an area that I realized that, they putt and roll. They really roll the ball. They don't hit the ball. They roll the ball, and just the end over end roll, the pace control, that really stood out to me. And to a man, they all kind of putted the ball really, really well. Most surprising thing I probably saw, like you said, we can shorten this up, but the questionable decision making, like, most notably out of Ludwig, the number one amateur in the world. And I do want to give him a hall pass on the fact that he is the number one amateur in the world, and he's seen things out of himself that probably lend itself to being a little more aggressive in certain situations, because he knows he has all the shots. But on the 6th hole, to contextualize for our listeners, Lambton, it's a par 5. It's probably 540 yards, and Ludwig hit it in the left rough. He had about 230 yards over a creek, out of the rough. Gnarly lie. twice he had this shot, and he dumped it in the water both times. That's a situation where you have some momentum. You just lay it down to your favorite number, 80, 90, 100 yards, and you have a pretty stock wedge shot in, and you make, make 4 or 5 at worst. And he made bogey both times. And that in the second round, it's a 36-hole contest. In the second round, that kicked off a string where he bogeyed 6, he bogeyed 7, he bogeyed 8, and he doubled 9. So I think and he ended up missing by 3, right? He ended up missing a playoff by 3. So the decision making, I saw Michael Block make a questionable decision early in the round. And then the biggest thing for me was the 9th hole at Lambton's a 400-yard par 4. It ended up ranking the 3rd hardest hole. Actually, excuse me, it was the 2nd hardest hole for the tournament. It's a 400-yard dogleg right. It basically, you just want to throw something 230 yards down the middle of the fairway, and then you have a 170-yard shot right into kind of like a very approachable green. I'd say it's tricky, but very manageable from 170 yards. It's an 8-iron for these guys. And the amount of drivers I saw these guys pull, Chan, they were it's an awkward angle. They tried to cover this tree. It's a very tight line with where these guys hit it. And that was the beginning of the end for a lot of these guys. Like the Canadian Luke Smith made a big number there. We watched Chris Alongo make a 9 there. I looked at the stats following the round, and out of the 54 rounds played for the day, there was 8 doubles or worse there. And I think a lot of it was just simply hitting driver off the tee. Like that's a hole where I'll just hit a 3 or 4 iron, leave myself a 7 or 8 iron in. You don't make worse than 5, typically. So the decision-making surprised me. The other thing I want to say before I move on to the US Open preview was Ludwig's ball striking definitely impressed me. That was the other thing that stood out. I think his pace of play, he just pulls the trigger so quickly, which I think will bode well on the PGA Tour. I think a lot of guys are going to like playing with him. And like you said, his dispersion, he's a 180 plus ball speed player. He carries the ball 300 yards in the air. His iron play was so crisp. We watched him hit some shots on 17. It's the par 3, 240 yards. He just hit these irons that came out of just a really tight window. The divot was just a clean dollar bill divot. I think he's got a really, really bright future ahead, and he had a solid week at the Canadian Open this week. So excited to kind of monitor his progress. And I think you and I spoke earlier, Chan, it's a testament to the PGA Tour University program that they've run, that the recipient that finishes first in that standings gets PGA Tour privileges for the rest of the year. So really cool to see that a guy coming out of college can go right on the tour and immediately compete and mix it up with the best. It does show that the NCAA puts out an amazing product and is an amazing circuit to compete on. So that was kind of my takeaways. I mean, we could talk forever on the experience, but let's get into the US Open, Chan. This is kind of what we've been building up to the whole time. US Open coming up this week. We're going to be releasing this on Wednesday, the day before the tournament. It's at Los Angeles Country Club, the North Course. It's the first PGA Tour event that's been held at this venue in 83 years. The last event was the LA Open in 1940. By all accounts, this course is epic. It's a parkland course in LA. Like, some of the vistas are unbelievable. It's going to be really cool to see this course on TV for the first time for a lot of us. One other notable for our listeners, this course hosted the 2017 Walker Cup, which is basically like the most, it's kind of like the Ryder Cup, but for amateur golf. So the U.S. plays Great Britain and Ireland. So they played this back at this course in 2017. So Scotty Scheffler and Colin Morikawa were on that U.S. Walker Cup team in 17. So they've seen the course competitively. Granted, it's been 6 years since they played it, but they've played it under tournament conditions. So I don't know, man. I'm just excited to see this venue on TV. Like, it's probably one of the most expensive pieces of real estate, out there in LA. So, what are your thoughts? What are you most looking forward to?
Man, I mean, you took the words right out of my mouth. I don't know if there's anything more exciting than this golf course on TV. I think No Laying Up did a bit of a preview of it with one of their film rooms, and dude, the rough line bunkers is something that I just can't get over. It just looks so pure, right? I don't know. I'm just so excited to see how this course holds up. I think, they talk a lot about the versatility of the golf course. I think they can play it in a million ways, which I think sets up really cool for a US Open, right? I think the more versatility that you have in and around your course setup, especially in the US Open, where the USGA really likes to make it a challenge, will make the course even more challenging for the players, because you can just set it up in so many different ways throughout the golf tournament. So I'm really excited to see how that does, and I'm also excited to see how the course holds up. Um, I'm curious to see how well they play it. I've heard mixed reviews. I've heard that there's a sort of a consortium of tough golf holes, but also a few not so tough holes. But then there's a couple not so tough holes that can play really tough if you get out of position. So I'm really interested to see how it all unfolds. I think, the US Open is usually one where you kind of flip a coin. Like, the golf course can play really tough. Some years, they set it up where it's crazy, and then other years, they set it up as it's crazy, but then guys kind of find their way to maneuver around the golf course proficiently. So I'm just really excited. And then, double it up with the quality of the piece of property that they have their hands on. I think it's going to be a really cool latter half of this week, bud.
And I think too, it's so neat. I was watching them preview the tournament, watching the Golf Channel preview the tournament, and there's a par 3 that can play longer than one of their par 4s. Like, one of these par 3s out there can play 290, and another par 4 can play like 280. So it's just, like you said, the creativity that they're going to be able to have, and just to be able to showcase this piece of property on TV for everyone that we otherwise wouldn't be able to see, I think is so exciting. And I think, to speak to the US Open and the USGA, they took a lot of heat probably for the last decade, or for the last decade. They've been taking a ton of heat around just course setup and players really butting heads with the USGA and the way that they're setting golf courses up, where it's either too hard or not the right layout in terms of the tees they've been choosing, and so forth. And I think something to note, Jason Gore is one of the player directors. He came on board. He's a past PGA Tour member and a really likable figure out on the circuit. He joined the USGA, I think it was a few years ago, Chan. And ever since he came on board, I think the players have been so much more receptive and so much more excited about the championship, in terms of like appreciating the way they set up the golf course, and just feeling like it's a more fair test, like firm but fair. So I think all signs point to this being a great championship, and just where the parity in the world of golf right now, like, there's so many guys that could get it done. Like, this isn't the Tiger era where there's one favorite. Like, there's just there's so many elite players that could factor in this golf tournament. I'm just so excited to see where it goes. And I think in terms of our picks this week, I wanted to do something a little bit different. So I asked you to pick me one guy in the top 10 of the official world golf ranking. So give me, ostensibly your favorite, then pick me one guy outside the top 10 of the official world golf ranking. And then finally, I wanted you to pick one guy from the US Open Final Qualifier list, somebody who had to go through one of those 13 qualifying sites like Lambton, that's going to be teeing it up in the tournament, but he's definitely a dark horse. So I think that's kind of, I always am excited to see where your mind goes in terms of the picks. So let's see if we can do a little better than the PGA Championship. We'll go 1-1-1-1. So give me your pick for the top 10 in the OWGR. Who do you like this week to win?
I'm taking Max.
Maxi Homa.
Yeah. I think, he's proven he does well near home. And I think that, the only asterisk now for him sort of separating himself as like a really, 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 really notable guy is his ability to compete in the majors. And I think there's no better way to sort of rip the Band-Aid off and then putting it right in his backyard. So I think, he's had a lot of success this year and previous years in California. I think he's probably one of the better players succeeding in the California circuit. Right. And I think now that he feels comfortable, feels at home, he's got a great attitude. And now he's got the comfortability of it being sort of in and around where he's grown up playing, maybe not at LACC, but just in that sort of vicinity. I think he's gonna sort of have that breakthrough tournament this weekend.
I like that pick, man. I thought about him earlier in the year, Mr. California. The guy's been electric in California. Like, majority of his wins are in that state, and obviously it's where he resides, and it's his home. So I love that pick. Where I went, I went with the world number one, Chan. I went with Scotty Scheffler. Despite all the talk about his poor putting. He's still, like I mentioned earlier, he has 16 straight top 12 finishes in a run that included like a couple of wins. He's probably right now, he's a generational ball striker. What he's currently doing is generational stuff. Like it's up there with the way that Tiger hit the ball back in his prime. I don't think people are appreciating like how insane his iron game is at the moment, because his swing is just kind of quirky, but he's hitting the ball like very few have ever hit the ball in the history of the game. And I think the US Open puts a premium on obviously ball control. I just think if he's even able to just find a semblance of average putting, he could potentially just mow the field down. He's that good. He's proven that he can compete at the highest stage. He can win. He won the Masters. He's an absolute world beater. And I just think he's also seen this course in competitive play. I know it was 6 years ago, but he's going to show up to that property and he's going to have a sense of familiarity around, where the range is, where the pro shop is, all these different things. These little things for a player do add up when you're coming to a site and you've been there before. I just think he's my guy. I mean, he could end up disappointing me, but based on all the data I have in front of me, I think I'm going to go with Scotty. So I like both of those picks. Would love to see a Max Homa W too. I'm a big Maxi fan. So give me your second pick, guy outside the top 10 in the OWGR. Go for me.
I'm not making the same mistake twice, Cam. You know what's coming. I'm taking Brooks. I'm taking Brooks. I'm taking him. I can't. And I was right on the cusp of taking him in the PGA, and I took Dustin, and I think Brooks, honestly, the guy is he's playing sick. I mean, the guy knows how to win, and he proved it a few weeks back, and he's had success also at US Opens. I mean, there's not much else that I can say. Like, he knows how to win. He's playing well. He's a scary guy when he's playing well, and he's healthy. Like I fear the field when he's healthy and competitive, right? And he just, when we were watching him close, and he just looked so strong on his way home on the PGA Championship. And yeah, I mean, I'm not making the same mistake twice. And if it bites me, I'm totally okay with it, because I feel good that he's going to compete.
Well, buddy, you took the words right out of my mouth. I learned my lesson. I picked DJ at the PGA, and it's just, what can you say, right? The guy has 5 major wins. He's healthy. He's up to 13th in the world, despite not getting official world golf ranking points for the last year outside of the majors. It's insane, right? Like, if he was getting points and playing all that time, like, he'd be factoring in the top as one of the top players in the world. He's won multiple times on the live circuit. Like, yeah, definitely not going to sleep on Brooksy twice. Love him or hate him, he's a generational talent, right? Like, he's he's going to go down as one of the best players of this generation, and his confidence and his swagger is something that you don't see out of, many players that I've ever watched. And I'm not going to sleep on him again. And once like you said, even if he missed the cut, I'm happy with where, with that pick. And we probably honestly could have excluded him from the pick, because it was just so obvious that we had to go there. It's a notable mention, given the fact that Brooksy was the obvious choice for both of us. I'm going to drop a notable mention on Tyrrell Hatton. I know you were bullish on him in the PGA. I love what I've been seeing out of him, honestly, the last few weeks. Like, we were watching on Saturday, the Canadian Open. He was playing his front nine, and I said to my folks, I said, Tyrrell is going to factor in this golf tournament tomorrow. And then he shot the final round 64 to launch himself one shy of the playoff. Like, he hits the ball so straight, like you called out in our preview or in our recap before. It's the ball straight as an arrow. He's one of the best putters on the planet. He's so confident. I just love what I'm seeing out of Tyrrell right now. The only red flag is his temper. And there's going to be some frustrating moments at the US Open. It's just the nature of the beast with a golf tournament like that. It's a war of attrition. And I just don't know if mentally he'll be able to process some of the bad breaks that he's going to get, that you inevitably get in the US Open. That would be my only red flag, if he can just hold himself together mentally. But that's something I wanted to call out, whether it's this week or not. I think I'm really bullish on Tyrrell throughout the rest of the year, whether it's the Open Championship or, you know, other designated PGA Tour events. I think he has now taken his game since he finished so strong at the Players earlier this year and launched himself into I think he finished second or third. I think it was third. Look out for Tyrrell Hatton. I think he starts picking off some wins. So he's my notable mention. Chan, give me your final qualifier pick. There was a million ways we could have gone here. Who did you like?
First off, Cam, you took the words right out of my mouth. You're reading my mind. If not Brooks, I would have taken Tyrrell too. I think he competes this week too. I also think that maybe this is a bit of a bold statement, but I honestly think that the temperament may be controlled. I think he's going in with the thought process. It's the US Open. He knows he's going to have quirky stuff, right? Like that's what the US Open has been for generations, right? It's always been a really tough test of golf. I think it may work in his favor, him going in knowing that he's going to have some weird stuff that happens. I don't know, but I love the way he hits the ball. I love the way he putts. I think he's going to be a competitor too, but I just couldn't pass up on Brooks given the opportunity.
Agreed.
Okay, so final
last
qualifying.
One, hit me.
I took Vincent.
I love it.
I was really, really impressed with his game at Lambton. I also really want to this is just again good for Canadian golf. Anytime someone competes out of final qualifying in Canada and competes in the US Open, I think it's going to be a testament to the level of quality of Golf Canada and the courses that we have the privilege of playing. So I took Vincent. I think he was so steady coming home. Shot a really deep round in his second round to play himself into the tournament. You know, he's a clear favorite from a fan base standpoint. Guys were trying to find him all day long to watch him come home when he was
outside of blocky.
Of course, when he was but I'm saying when he was really deep on that second 30 on his second 18 to the 36, sure. he was really, really under par at one point, and people were really excited, and he had a great narrative around him. I think he started okay at the Canadian Open, had a bit of a tougher second round, but I think he's going in with momentum. He's having a good year. He's got status. I think, I'm happy. I'm happy with taking him. I like his game. We talked to him after, very briefly. Seems like a really stand-up guy too. Happy to be on board with him. But before we chime on, I was really surprised with the quality from the youth guys in the final qualifying across the Americas, right? There were so many guys that are still in and around the college age that have done really well and qualified into this US Open. So the Stanford boys qualified, Carl Phillips and Thor Bjornsson, they both qualified. Barclay qualified. A lot of really
Summerhays. Weston Summerhays. Yep.
A lot of really good young talent that is going to be showcasing in this year's US Open. So that's really exciting for the world ahead of us in competitive golf, right? Is you seeing all these guys qualifying themselves in is really, really cool.
Gordon Sargent, right? He competed in the Masters.
He blew the doors down off his qualifier too.
Yeah. So I agree, man. And I like the pick. I think to add some more context, you and I were on the golf course. We were following, Harry Hall quite a bit, Michael Block's group quite a bit, Ludwig, sort of the bigger names for sure. Jimmy Walker, we'd like to watch. And then kind of word started trickling around that this Vincent Norman, it's like, oh, this guy's an unbelievable ball striker. And we hadn't seen too much of him. Mm-hmm. And just a few of our buddies came up and said, you got to see this guy hit the ball. And so we ended up watching him close his round. And the 18th hole, he needed to make a par to qualify. And so we were watching him from probably a 300-yard vantage point down the fairway. And he just annihilated the driver, probably 330 in a spot that you just don't see guys hit it. And left himself, you could throw it on the green from where he was. He ended up closing with a birdie. He closed, he shut the door on the qualifier. So I agree, man. I like the pick. I think it'd be cool. And he was a cool guy after. We saw him after and just congratulated him on the qualification. And he was very, very approachable and seemed very down to earth for sure.
How cool was the fan reaction too? Cause he was the separator between whether or not guys were going to get into a playoff. And that playoff included Hall and Jimmy Walker, which I think a lot of people wanted to see from a fan standpoint. And he just, I mean, we were chopping shop in the fairway on 18, and we're like, hey, we're probably in and around the right spot to see him in his next one, and he flew it like 10 yards by us.
Blew it by us.
We're like, where'd he go? And it's 20 yards past us in the center of the fairway. I've never seen anybody hit it anywhere there. I'm sure you probably haven't either. And then he flips a wedge into a few feet and taps it in for birdie and shuts all the noise for any sort of a playoff. So it was just cool. I again, I think he's a stand-up guy too. So I'm wishing him the best of success this weekend.
And it wasn't an easy hole, right? 18's a 450-yard par 4, like not a gimme 4. And for him to just close in style like that, I think it does bode well for the tournament.
Really tough green too.
My pick, Donor, I wanted to go with one of the young guns that you called out. I looked at a Sargent. I looked at Preston Summerhays. I love Preston Summerhays. Thor Bjornsson is an absolute stud. There's so many ways you could have gone with it. I ended up going with experience. So I've landed on Sergio Garcia, if you can believe it. I'm not candidly, I'm not the biggest Sergio fan. I think the way that things have unfolded over the last year or so have been pretty tough. Like a few of the things he said about the European Tour and some of the guys and just the way he's handled it. I wouldn't endorse, his behavior, but I just think it was really cool that he wasn't eligible to play in the tournament. And as a past Masters champion, one of the most storied European players of this generation, he said, I'm going to go out to qualify. And he went out. I think he went out in Texas where he lives. He went out. He qualified. He posted the numbers. He got through. I commend him on doing that. I think there was other guys like Taylor Gooch said, screw it. I'm not going out to qualify. I'm not going to do it. Sergio strapped up his boots. He laced them up. He went out with some unknown guys and just punched his ticket, put himself out there. I commend him on doing that. I think ball striking wise, he's still a top player in the world in terms of striking the ball. And he has the major championship experience. And that's what I want to see going into a major. I know his attitude is very day to day, but I chose experience over potential on this one. I was also looking at Stewie Sink. The two guys I looked over were Stewie Sink and Vince Norman. I looked over both those guys. Love Stewie, love his attitude. He still strikes the ball super well. As I'm saying this, I'm kind of going back and forth on Stewie, but
best tan in the league too.
Yeah, best head tan in the league. I'm gonna stick with Sergio. I just think with his major championship record, I just think he could surprise folks. So I think I'm gonna land there. But Chan, we've been going a while. We covered so many bases today. I'm so excited for this week of golf. The US Open is going to be electric. I know you have the member guest with our boy Pete White at Credit Valley. So you've got a great week of golf ahead. And yeah, just hope everybody enjoyed this recap / preview. And yeah, really looking forward to watching the golf and seeing how things shake out. So Donor, thanks for joining us here on this Monday. And really excited for the week ahead.
Thanks, Lens. Me too, bud.
And for everybody listening, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate your support. We appreciate your continued follow. And feel free to share this with your friends if you enjoyed it and you think what we have to say has even a modicum of value. Feel free to pass it along. And we appreciate your support once again. Cheers, everyone. Thanks for joining us on today's episode of Behind the Brim. And if you want more golf content, follow us on social at BehindTheBrim_golf on both Instagram and TikTok. Hope you have a great week.